This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. We are back with another episode of Art of Darkness, the podcast about the dark side of creativity. I'm Kevin Kautzman, coming to you from beautiful St. Paul, Minnesota, joined by Brad's new wallpaper. For those who are watching us on the YouTubes, Brad has some wonderful new, vaguely psychedelic wallpaper in the background. Brad, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah. My background for the last couple episodes has just been brown. I've moved into a new space since the Art of Darkness kicked off originally, and now we've got some cool William Morris style Victorian psychedelic wallpaper going on, and there'll be some changes as time goes on. But right now we be tripping down here. So
we be tripping. And the discourse on Twitter right now is around ayahuasca, and it seems like a certain corner of Twitter is like, don't go down there and do that. Don't go down to Peru. And I know you have some strong opinions about ayahuasca, Brad.
Yeah.
Ayahuasca. Yay or nay? Real quick, Brad.
Oh, well, gun to head, it's good that it exists, but it's not for everyone.
Understood. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about ayahuasca on the After Dark for Patreon and Substack. This is a core episode. For those who are new to the podcast, core episodes are the heart of what we do. We do biographical profiles of dead artists. They need to be dead for a year before we will cover them. Today we're doing Ursula K. Le Guin, and I got a lot prepared for y'all. I got a big 14-page outline here. I got some great books. I'm really excited to do this. Do we have any housekeeping? Yes, we do. Real quickly, it's the end of September in the foul year of our Lord 2024. This time next month, I'm going to be in Detroit, Michigan, where Brad is, to do The Death of Harry Houdini at Planet Ant in Hamtramck, which I understand is in Detroit, essentially.
It is. It's like the Vatican's inside Rome, sort of.
Right. Or more like Rome is outside of the Vatican.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The Hamtramck doesn't have that deep significance, but as a geographic phenomena, it's a city within a city.
And of course, Brad is the Pope of Hamtramck. We'll be rolling up in a completely fortified golf cart for the live show that we're doing on October 26th at Planet Ant. It's our one live show for the year. Harry Houdini, he died in Detroit. I know Brad's prepping some stuff. It's a costume party. Costumes are optional. We will certainly be in costume. There's going to be a cool opener. It's going to be a lot of fun. Get tickets. They're going to go. It's not a huge space. So go to artofdarkpod.com. The link is right there. You cannot miss it. Anything else you want to say about the live show, Brad?
No, we're just looking forward to seeing people. I know we've sold some chunk of tickets, so if you're thinking about going, I would definitely recommend getting your hands on those and make sure you got a seat. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys. It's going to be a great time.
Absolutely. And if you're going to be in town, find us on Telegram, t.me/artofdarkpod, or the Discord, which is artofdarkpod.com/Discord. Get in there, especially if you're coming in from out of town. Like if you're in town, yeah, great. Let us know, because we're going to do some stuff around it. Maybe we'll play a round of golf. I don't know. in the fortified golf cart. It's going to be fun.
I mean, if you're going to have a fortified golf cart, you might as well get your money's worth.
You got to use that thing. Exactly. Right. You're going to be the driver of that, Brad. You'll be both the Pope and the chauffeur. You'll be your own chauffeur.
Is that bilocation? Is that what they mean by bilocation?
I don't. I think it was like Bisexual and Awareness Day recently.
Oh,
so
really,
yeah.
I was already aware of them, so I don't really feel like I needed
You
They
didn't
were
need a
already
whole
on my
day.
radar.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were already on my radar, you might say.
they're hard to miss. They're really out there. Okay, we have fun on Art of Darkness, and yeah, so core episodes are the heart of what we do. Every episode, we do bonus content for Patreon for a Substack. I'll tease that in a little bit, but because this is a core episode, the format that we start with is always that the host who's doing the bulk of the episode, the one who's prepared the research, asks the other host, the co-host, what do they know about the subject. So I have to ask Brad's wallpaper right now. Brad, what is your wallpaper? What do you know about Ursula K. Le Guin?
I was just going to try to do the voice of my wallpaper, and I think it's
don't
something sort of
don't. You have to imagine this like neo modern Victorian. It looks like something that like is still torturing Oscar Wilde. It's
yeah.
actually
Oh
really
yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
theater of the mind. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I don't actually know a whole lot about her personally. Probably born, I mean, she's like silent generation would be my guess. 20s or 30s born. Um, what else do I know about her? I mean, great science fiction writer. I know she was hugely prolific. I believe her books occupy not that they're like sequels of each other, but I think there's two worlds. There's the Earthsea world, books like Wizard of Earthsea, and I know there's a whole bunch in that. And then there's another world or cycle that I don't remember the name of. Um Books I've read of hers were The Dispossessed and The Left Hand of Darkness, which we're doing in the book club, I think October 19th, I believe. To So for our subs and doms, please join us there. We're reading that book and hanging out in the Zoom room. But personally, she's American. I associate her with like Berkeley and that area, but I don't really know how close that tie is. And then other than that, I don't know a whole heck of a lot about her, except I know she died just a few years ago, in the 2010s, I want to say. So, but yeah, other than that, nothing. I know she's extremely talented. I love The Left Hand of Darkness, so I'm looking forward to learning more about her.
Absolutely. And book club is coming up. It's on October 19th. We share the link on Substack and Patreon ahead of the event. It lasts about 90 minutes. Brad and I are there. You can join if you want. The whole thing is recorded. We do it on Zoom. And then if you don't want to join us for the club itself, you can listen back to it. It's extra stuff after the fact. And that's on October 19th. So stay tuned. The link to all the book club stuff is at artofdarkpod.com/book-club. And you're pretty much right there, Brad. You didn't really miss anything too much. Obviously, we're going to go a lot deeper on Art of Darkness here. The two big cycles or like big worlds are the Hainish cycle and Earthsea. And so just to orient here, the Hainish cycle is a series of science fiction novels and stories set in a universe where multiple planets, including Earth, known as Terra, share a common ancestral origin with the planet Hain. Over millennia, these planets diverge, developing unique cultures, societies, and biologies. Notable works in this cycle include The Left Hand of Darkness, The Dispossessed, The Word for World is Forest, and Rakanan's World. Themes of the Hainish cycle include gender, politics, anarchism, and environmentalism. And then the second world that she created, or universe she created, is called Earthsea. And this is a fantasy series set in an archipelago of hundreds of islands populated by people, dragons, and other magical creatures.
Hey, all right. Okay.
Hey, so that's the kind of mind that we're dealing with here in the great Ursula K. Le Guin. And The Left Hand of Darkness is a banger. If you're, it's not even October yet when we're recording this. We'll be putting this out today. Listen, I mean, there's still time to read it, and we're going to talk about it. Oh, and Brad, I think I mentioned this in the green room in pre-production that I want you to do some reading on this episode. So I have some links for you, and I'm going to start shooting them into the chat so you can you can pull them up and be ready to go. I know these core episodes can get to be a little bit but not we're never monotonous, But
No.
when the one host is going, it can be nice to hear the other voice. So I'm throwing these into the chat right now, and I want you to be ready because you're the prose stylist. You're the
Oh
I know
no.
novelist, um and as far as I know, there's not really like a comprehensive biography of Ursula K. Le Guin. It hasn't been that long since she passed.
Mm,
And so what I have in terms of books, I have Ursula K. Le Guin, No Time to Spare. And these are like blog posts. She had a blog thinking about what matters. And this is sort of like at the end of her life. And then I have a little book called Ursula K. Le Guin, Conversations on Writing. I have another one called Ursula K. Le Guin, The Last Interview. She loved to give interviews,
okay.
or at least she was willing to do it. And just in case you're wondering why Ursula K. Le Guin, maybe you're like me and you weren't that familiar with her work before digging in here. Have a look here. Can you see, Brad? I have
Oh yeah.
yeah. What are these? The Library of America volume
Mhm.
of her work. This is about the highest honor that an American writer can receive in
Oh yeah.
publishing.
Yeah,
This this
absolutely.
this is if you're published by this imprint or whatever you want to call it, it
Yeah.
essentially means you're in the canon.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And we're going to see here in the psychology and the thinking of Ursula that she was like an insider's outsider. She was raised with what we would probably call privilege. Her parents are blue links in Wikipedia, right?
Oh
One
yeah.
one
Okay.
one gets the impression that she didn't want for much. Uh, shall we say? She went
Mhm.
to she'd land at Radcliffe, right, the women's school at Harvard, and ended up meeting her husband on a Fulbright. But if you asked her, she would have said, "I'm an outsider." Right?
Ah,
I
yes, of
because I'm a
course.
woman. Right? Yeah. Right. Because I'm a woman writing science fiction, and
Well, she's got a
yeah,
point, especially at that
yes,
time. Yeah.
absolutely. And if you were born, a woman, a female in 1929, and you decided to devote yourself to science fiction and fantasy, fair to say that's a pretty masculine domain.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think she's justified in thinking that way, and in a way, I feel like that chip on her shoulder moved her and motivated her, and so we're gonna think about this idea of the outsider as we go through this episode
Yeah.
on Ursula K. Le Guin. Do you have
Yeah,
something,
given
Brad?
that's a whole jab. So the first link you sent me is giving me some
Oh,
an
well, don't
account
don't worry
suspended
about it.
thing.
Oh no, don't worry about it. We'll find another example. Yeah, this is what
Okay.
happens when you go scouring for PDFs
Oh yeah,
on
I'm
the
quite familiar. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
rest of them are good though.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, very good. I think we can find another example of oh, of course it got suspended because they want to protect the IP, I'm sure.
Wow. Yes.
Let me see if I can find you another example of that. That's the PDF of A Wizard of Earthsea. Uh,
You keep going. I'll track that down.
yeah, yeah. See if you can find that, Brad. Yeah, because I want to hear some of her prose. As we go here, it's extraordinary. We'll also hear a little bit of her poetry, particularly poems from toward the end of her life. Um, what else? So yeah, I want to tease the Patreon and Substack. So again, we always do a bonus After Dark episode for every episode we do, whether it's a core episode of Dark Room, whatever. So if you want extra content, you want to support the podcast, and maybe that's the most important thing. You want to see us keep doing this. Get on Patreon, get on Substack, patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod, substack.com/at Art of Dark Pod. You get core episodes a week early too, like 5, 6, 7 days early. We publish the core episodes ahead of time, so you can get in before the hoi polloi. I think we set it at like $5 to get in the door. Come on, you got $5.
Yeah.
Listen, I was shopping, I was on Grubhub just now. They want $7, they want $8 for a pumpkin spice thing. All right.
That's insane.
That's where we are now, people.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
You can support this podcast for $5 a month. If you listen to an entire single full core episode a month, I think that's $5 of value. What do you think, Brad? I think
Oh
so.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Really, yeah, we
100%.
put in the work, so please support the pod and get the bonus content. We don't phone it in. All right,
Yeah.
let's see here. So I've already mentioned my source material, and here's what we're going to talk about in the After Dark. So we are going to talk about how to become a writer per Le Guin. She had a lot of
Mm.
thoughts about writing. She was
Mm.
a writer's writer, one of us,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
crafts person, like legitimately thought about writing and really resented the idea that genre is like a ghetto. Like for her,
Mm-hmm.
it's all literature. She was one of those.
Yeah,
She was a big
I'm with her.
important part of that realization that like, oh wait, Dune is like as good as The Great Gatsby. Like
Right.
just because it's about space hallucinogenics and royal twinks.
Some
Uh
may argue that makes it better.
Indeed, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, Fitzgerald was kind of a royal twink too,
Well,
so
it's his birthday
uh
today, by the way.
oh, the great God.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a little prayer for the soul of the great F. Scott Fitzgerald here. I really feel uh I feel a real connection to him here living in St. Paul like I do. And of course our first live show was F. Scott Fitzgerald part 1.
Indeed.
Uh
Indeed.
a great foot guy. Our one confirmed foot guy on the podcast would have to be F. Scott
Yeah.
Fitzgerald. So the great one. All right.
Yeah.
I've got a little bit about her father's anthropological work with Native Americans out
Oh.
west, and sort of I think they like maybe one of them moved in with him or something. Like they were really really close to a fellow named Ishi who was part of a tribe. So we'll talk more about that and some
Oh,
interesting
I think
stuff.
I know about Ishi. Interesting. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then we're going to read the New York her obituary in the New York Times. We're going to talk about ayahuasca with Brad
Hmm.
because I
Hmm.
I feel like it. I think that's a fun kind of sci-fi adjacent topic. Maybe we'll talk
Hmm.
about the elves.
Yeah.
And I sort of want to think about this episode in terms of like craft and writing and what we as writers, you the novelist, I the playwright, can possibly glean from this genius of a woman, this genius writer. And we're gonna get into the biography now. One last plug. I got two things to plug real quick. Go listen to my new radio play, Basilisk from Dark Pony Radio. Spotify, Basilisk, Dark Pony Radio, AI thriller horror in 2 parts. Check it out. I just went on New Right with the Nutman with the great Dan Bultick, the show's lawyer. Talked for 2 hours. At one point, he asked me about the pros and cons of being.
Mm.
So if you want deep thoughts with Kevin and the Nutman, that you can go. We talk about the basilisk on that. So go listen to that. And then finally, if you are in the Twin Cities, if you are in Minnesota this October 2024, we are producing my play Moderation about social media content moderators losing their minds at work, October 3rd to the 13th at the Hive in St. Paul, Minnesota. Tickets are on sale now. If you want $5 off, the promo code is BADMOUTH. Opening night, like the first Thursday, is pay what you can. Okay. Okay. Ready to go? Let's do it.
Awesome. All
All
right.
right. Here we
Let's
go.
do it.
All right. So, okay. Ursula Krober Le Guin was born on October 21st, 1929, in Berkeley, California. Can you imagine, dude? 1929 in California.
Mm.
Like how long had it really been settled? I mean, I guess they
Right.
were kind of getting out there. Like it was the gold rush and
Yeah.
they'd been out there a
Honestly,
while, but like,
it was probably kind of awesome.
yeah,
1929 is probably awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
just
No
great weather.
traffic. Yeah. Weather's incredible. The landscape's beautiful. Yeah.
Right.
Everybody out there is like ambitious and trying to make not in like the Hollywood sense, but like they're like a sense that you're founding a place, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I imagine if somebody littered, you just slap them.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Just slap them. She
Yeah.
was born into a family deeply involved in the culture or in the study of culture and anthropology. And this is key. All right.
Mhm.
Her work in science fiction was thought experiments. She would say in one of her interviews that where her interest fell off in her work was when it reached the level of engineering. She had
Mm.
no interest in how the travel was done. She would limit herself, like they can't go faster than the speed of light. She would have like a very elementary understanding of sort of science and advanced science and all the rest, like basic understanding, just enough to use the science fiction as a vehicle to conduct thought experiments. So, for example, in The Left Hand of Darkness, what's the key feature of The Left Hand of Darkness, Brad? If you had to really summarize, like, what's the
Oh,
core of the thought experiment?
it's been so long, but I mean,
No, 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 but
basically,
it's
people can
yeah,
just can change sex, right?
it's
Yeah,
pure. It's sci-fi that David Bowie would approve of, right? It's
right.
just pure gender bending, but like literally physical sex bending. The
Hmm.
the population on the planet, they're not male, they're not female, they're neither and both
Hmm.
somehow.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
this like epic meditation on the nature of gender and sex. So a little ahead of its time, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, okay, so it's natural that somebody who was born into a family of anthropologists, right? You could see she didn't fall that far from the tree. Okay. Her father, Alfred Louis or Louis Kraber, was one of the most influential anthropologists in the U.S., particularly known for his work documenting Native American cultures, including his famous relationship with Ishi, the last known member of the Yahi tribe. Brad, you said you might know about Ishi. What
Yeah,
do you know about
I
this guy?
just knowing that name, I thought maybe it could be a different Ishi. There was he was like there was a hunter-gatherer tribe that had sort of held out in California long after the closing of the frontier and all of that. And Ishi, to my understanding, was like the last surviving member of that tribe who grew up living like a hunter. He was a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. It was like an uncontacted tribe, sort of, but in the continental United States.
Right.
And they found him, and I just remember they tried to integrate him into normal society in some way, and we're
Mhm.
studying him.
This is going
So
to be the future of your family after the EMPs go off. You'll be the
that's right.
anthropologist who you're finding the last juggalo out there.
Right.
You're trying to
That's right.
integrate him into society.
Right, right.
Uh, that's
And in
maybe a
fact,
little
we learned more from him than he learned from us, you know.
absolutely.
That's
I think that's right. I think that's right. And in case you don't know the show, we laugh so we don't cry, is one of
yeah.
our things. Okay. Yeah. So he was the last known member of the Yahi tribe. Her mother, and this is Ishi, was the last known member. Her mother, Theodora Graber, Theodora.
It's a good name.
That's a name you don't hear much anymore.
No.
It's a good
No.
one though. Was a writer and anthropologist herself, authoring the acclaimed Ishi in Two Worlds, which chronicled Ishi's life and his interactions with her husband.
Hmm.
Fascinating, very interesting family to come from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very high status family out in California. All right, so we're going to talk about her parents here to sort of get this background and understand Ursula's origins. Her upbringing was steeped in intellectual and cultural exploration, largely shaped by her parents. Theodora Kraber was not only an accomplished writer, but also an astute observer of cultural interaction. Born in 1897 in Denver, Colorado, she grew up in the mining town of Telluride after and later studied at the University of California, Berkeley, earning degrees in psychology. After her first husband died, Theodora returned to UC Berkeley to pursue doctoral studies in anthropology, where she met Alfred Kraber. No slouch. I'm getting a
Yeah, for real.
PhD. I grew up in a mining town. I am a woman. I am going to get my PhD in 1929 or in the
Yeah.
1920s. I'm working toward my
Wild.
PhD. Um,
Wild.
Crazy, right? So I've
Yeah.
got Ursula's probably one of the highest IQ people we've covered. Let's just say that. So I've
Fair
got something
enough.
from the last interview book that I have here. All right. Ursula K. Le Guin has said that her father, Alfred Kraber, studied real cultures, while she made them up. Indeed, many of the
Mhm.
writer's most celebrated novels are set in intricately imagined realms, from the sci-fi universe of Ecumen to the fantasy archipelago of Earthsea. This inventor of worlds grew up in Berkeley. Her father was the University of California's first professor of anthropology. Kraber Hall, the campus building that houses the department, is named in his honor. You'll have to excuse me too when
Wow.
having read her and her this huge chip on her shoulder she has about being an outsider. Let me just play the world's tiniest
Right.
violin for you. Like
Was
okay,
your dad's wing of the college was it big enough? Yeah.
you know,
Right.
yeah. But I mean, okay, everybody has their own experience of
Hmm.
life. A pioneer of cultural anthropology, today, Professor Kraber is best remembered for his association with and research on Ishi, the man believed at the time to have been the last of the California Yahi tribe. He was even called the last wild Indian in North America. That was the subtitle, in fact, of the book Ishi in Two Worlds, written by Le Guin's mother, Theodora Kraber, who met Le Guin's father while she was a graduate student in Berkeley, many such cases. The book made her famous in her own right. Now, in a 50th anniversary edition from UC Press, Ishi in Two Worlds has sold more than 1 million copies.
Wow.
Okay. All right. So, in a future date, maybe we do a special 1 hour episode on Ishi, entirely. All right.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Le, yeah. Le Guin and her three older brothers grew up in a Bernard Maybeck house on Arch Street, not far from campus. She remembers life there as easygoing and generous, and that the family home was filled with the conversations of interesting grown-ups, including academics, intellectuals, and the members of various California Indian tribes. California Magazine caught up with Le Guin as she was preparing to come to the Berkeley campus to deliver the 2013 Avenali lecture. So, of course, we're going to skip around in time a little bit. Remember, science fiction. I want to read
Hmm.
some of this interview because it brings her back home, all the way back to Berkeley. Okay. Uh, so in any case, she comes home and delivers a speech. What can novels do? A conversation with Ursula Le Guin. And that's an important question. Brad, let me ask you real quick because I want to
Real
mix this up
quick.
a little bit. Real quick, what can novels do, Brad? You're working on one now. What
Oh
can novels do?
man. Well, I mean, in some ways they're consciousness altering um objects or experiences. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, fundamentally they're entertainment, but they're also entertainment that um sort of expands the field of human consciousness in a way. Like if you read a book, then you've sort of added a dimension to your scope of what the world is. Um, there's a lot of sort of arrogating greater powers to writing and writers than I think is appropriate. Writing will save the world and that kind of thing. And I've never really bought that. Um, I think they're for the best we can sort of do as a writer, or the best that a novel can kind of do, is to comfort the uncomfortable and discomfort the comfortable. You know what I mean? They can serve as a consolation, and sometimes a consolation to survive existence sort of psychically. um Consolation isn't just telling you a nice story. Sometimes it's like really confronting the anguish and fear and pressure uh, of being alive. And so I think of a good novel, as some sort of exploration of that field. Um, yeah. And if you want
Very
to know the truth, one other thing, sorry not to discourse on this entirely, but like to ask the question of like, what does a novel do? Or maybe even more broadly, like, what does art do? I think it's akin to the question of like, what are dreams for? And
ah.
you know what I mean? And I think some people will just be like, oh, it's just random bullshit that happens when you're asleep. And if you believe that, I mean, I don't know. You don't have the kind of crazy
The
dreams I have.
the spreadsheet got to you, if you believe
Right,
that.
right,
Yeah, maybe it's
right.
time to escape the big spreadsheet.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure.
That was very eloquent, Brad. I appreciate that. And
Yeah,
I want this episode to be to serve both as a biography of Le Guin, but also as kind of a meditation on writing and
I like it.
literature and why we should do it. All right.
Cool.
Okay. So here's Bridget Huber interviewing Le Guin. Does a return to Berkeley bring back a flood of memories? Ursula. I grew up in the 1930s and 40s, and Berkeley was a rather small city then. It didn't have the reputation that it got later of being extremely leftist, liberal, independent. It was just kind of a more conventional university town. It was an extremely nice place to be a kid. I could go anywhere. My best friend and I, we played all over the campus, and the campus wasn't all built up yet, you know? There were lots of lawns and forests, and Strawberry Creek was like a little wild creek. It was a wonderful place to play. Wasn't Berkeley somewhat bohemian even back then? Bohemian, you don't hear that word much anymore.
Mm.
Uh, Le Guin. There was room for bohemians in it, but it was really pretty middle class, not rigidly middle class like you might get in the Midwest. There was a lot of latitude always in Berkeley. And in the 30s and 40s, of course, it was full of refugees from Europe because the university had a wonderful policy of taking in intellectuals who were running from Hitler or Mussolini. I do believe that influx of brilliant European minds may have stirred the city up a bit. Huber, how would you characterize your parents' parenting style? How did they raise you? Well, I think they did a real good job. They were very loving and very patient, but they didn't hover. I wasn't very rebellious because there wasn't anything to rebel against. It was kind of easy to be a good girl, and I had three big brothers, and that was kind of cool too. Huber, were you children part of the dinner table conversations at home? As soon as we got old enough, I think until we were about 5, we'd eat upstairs with my great aunt Betsy, who lived with us. I think from about 5 on, we were considered civilized. Then Betsy got to come downstairs with us. We were all there at dinner, and there's brackets where she's laughing. She would laugh a lot. She liked to laugh.
Mm.
We
Nice.
were all there at dinner, and there was always conversation at dinner. In that sense, it probably seems very old-fashioned to people now. Huber. I was struck by your description of the teenage summers you spent at your family's ranch, wandering the hills alone. You said about it, I think I started making my soul then. Why are experiences like that important for kids to have? Listen to that again. I think I started making my soul there.
I like that.
Yeah. Here's what she said. It does seem that in the last 20 years or so, children got extraordinarily little solitude. Things are provided to do at all times, and the homework is so much heavier than what we had. But the solitude, the big empty day with nothing in it where you have to kind of make your own day yourself, I do think that's very important for kids growing up. I'm not talking about loneliness. I'm talking about having the option of being alone. If you're a very extroverted person, you probably don't want that. But if you're on the introverted side, you're not given much room in the world we've got now. You're kind of driven into the whole sociability of the social media. Texting is wonderful for teenagers. I was on the telephone all the time when I was 13 with my best friend. Gabble, 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 gabble. I mean, what do teenagers talk about? I don't know, but they need to do it. Texting looks like a wonderful way to do that, to just be in touch with each other all the time. But I think it's important that there also be an option not to be in touch for a while, to just drop out. How do you know who you are if you're always with other people doing what they do? That's true all through life. It's not just kids. So you would argue that we should try to give kids more space. Yeah, give them some room, give them room to be themselves, to flail around and make mistakes. I had lots of room given to me, so at least I know enough to value it. Did your parents encourage you to write? Not exactly. They just saw I was doing it and they would say, hey, that's fine, go ahead. But I was left very, very free. I had encouragement, but no pushing. Much has been made of the connection between your father's profession as an anthropologist and the nature of your fiction. How do you think his work influenced yours? Le Guin. I'm not sure that his work influenced mine because I didn't really know his work until I was well into my 20s and 30s and began reading him. I think about that sometimes. I think about my children hi, kids, when they come of age and they listen to this. Oh, no, no. Allow me to apologize just for the pros and cons of being children. Yes, but here's what she said. But I was formed as a writer earlier than that to a large extent. My father and I had certain similarities intellectually and temperamentally. We're interested in small details and getting them right. We're interested in how people do things and what they do and how they explain doing them. This is all kind of anthropological information. It's also novel information. It's what you
Mm,
build novels out of human relationships, how people arrange their relationships. Anthropology and fiction, they overlap to a surprising extent. Was Ishi's story, Ishi, the Indian, was Ishi's story a big part of your consciousness growing up? No, I honestly knew nothing at all about Ishi until they asked my father to write about him, and he sort of gave the job to my mother, and then she began researching him. This was in the very late 50s. Ishi died in 1916. I wasn't even born until 1929. My mother never knew Ishi. It was something way back in my father's life, and it was not a happy memory, I think, because of the way it ended. No, he had to feel very bad about the fact that Ishi died of white man's tuberculosis. My father did not reminisce. He wasn't one of those people who talked about old times, but I think there was some pain there that he didn't want to go back to. He was out of the country when Ishi died, and that always, they were friends after all. That's always hard to feel like I let him down. This is just guesswork on my part. He didn't want to talk about it, and it's not the kind of thing I would have asked him. What do you think about the way that Ishi was treated and his relationship with your father? That's two different questions, said Le Guin. One, the relationship was, as I understand it, a deep friendship within this curious constraint of their sort of formal relationship. Ishi was an informant and an employee of the museum, and my father was a professor. It was a more formal age, remember. The general question of how it was handled, I have to say, I think they did about the best job they could in the circumstances. They got Ishi a job. He had work to do within the white world that he'd been dumped into and a place to live, which apparently he liked. And he could meet the public and try to show them what being a Yahi was. I realize it has come in for enormous criticism from generations who have a lot of hindsight and say, my goodness, they were exploiting him and they could have done it different and so on. But they never convinced me that anybody then knew how to do it any better than they did. But it is a heartbreaking story. A little more here. Are you finding this interview useful? I think it's
oh
really
yeah,
great.
it's super
Really
interesting. Yeah.
reflecting. Yeah, because we don't have this like early biography of her so much where we have
Yeah.
day-to-day stuff. This Ishi story, it sounds like something Herzog would really
Doesn't
dig
it?
into. It's
Yeah.
like one of those stories about the nature of uh, colonialism and exploitation and putting a living Native American to work in a museum. And how do you relate to one another? What is his role? Or
Mhm.
how, yeah, I can see how
And
people.
well, and then from hindsight, and I don't know the details of the Yushi story, and we're learning some of them, but like it is easy for us to be like, well, they were exploiting him, but like, well, how did he feel about it? You know,
Right. Yeah.
we don't know. Or that's not always part of the story. I did read a thing in the background there. Apparently, he was the last. He literally Ishi when they found him, he like hunted with stone arrowheads that he carved himself. Like we're talking like he was a Stone Age man, basically.
That's wild.
Isn't
Yeah,
that
I
crazy?
have a little something here in the background. He was the last surviving member of the Yahi tribe, a subgroup of the Yana people in Northern California. He died from tuberculosis in March of 1916 at the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center. How crazy is that? You're saying he was like a
Mm,
Stone Age
right.
guy and he dies in, it's unreal. Ishi had lived in hiding for years after his tribe was decimated by violent raids, disease, and displacement during the gold rush. In
Mm,
1911, he was found near Oroville, California, after having lived in isolation. Yeah, that's like a Casper Hauser story. That's like
hmm
a Herzogian kind of subject, right?
hmm
He was taken in by anthropologists at UC Berkeley, including Kraber. Kraber, along with his colleague T.T. Waterman, worked closely with Ishi, learning about his language, culture, and traditions, documenting them for posterity. They brought him to live at the university's Museum of Anthropology, where he became a living link to the Ahi people. Uh, he uh, he died from tuberculosis, and let's see here. Ishi opposed the idea of an autopsy after his death because it violated his cultural beliefs, but an
Sure.
autopsy was performed against Craver's wishes. And parts of Ishii's remains were sent to the Smithsonian Institute. His
Hmm.
brain was only returned to California for reburial in the year 2000.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Art of Darkness. I have with Ursula. Ursula's not like someone like Burroughs, where you have to go.
Right.
You don't have to. You got to go digging a little bit for hers.
Sure. Sure.
Um, a little more from this interview. Let me see how many more pages there are. I probably won't read the entire interview. It's quite long, but it's very good. This is the interviewer. Your mother started writing later in life. She started writing about the same time I did, professionally speaking. She got published first, and of course, she got a bestseller. Ishii was UC Press's first bestseller. She said, "Oh, I always wanted to write, but I didn't want it to compete with bringing up the kids, so I had to get you all out from under." That's how I felt. And once she started writing, I think she wrote almost every day. She loved doing it. Both my parents wrote every day. I don't. I'm lazier. Your mother sounds like a very feisty and independent, unconventional woman, especially for her era. How did she shape the kind of woman you became? Le Guin. It's so complicated. My mother didn't call herself a feminist, but she gave me Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own and Three Guineas to read when I was 14, maybe. Those are very powerful books to give a girl. My mother was a free-thinking person. She thought for herself. She read and thought and talked. She was intellectual. So I think what my mother gave me was just the example of a woman with a free mind who chose to be a wife, mother, housewife, a hostess, the conventional life of a middle-class woman. She liked it very much. If she hadn't, I don't think she would have done it. My mother was a very independent Wyoming woman. My great aunt, or her mother, excuse me, was a very independent Wyoming woman. So her grandmother, Ursula's grandmother, Wyoming, Colorado, California. These are Western people. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
My great aunt was a strong influence on me, and she was very much an independent Western woman who went her own way. That side of my family, they were strong Western women. Was a lot of independence there. Huber, where do you think your feminist consciousness came from then? In my generation, it was beginning to grow everywhere, and I was kind of slow catching up to the early feminist movement. But there came a point in our lives when it was kind of a matter of survival. Again, it's so complicated, but there has been a very large revolution in thinking during my lifetime. I think we won't go back to where we were when I was born, which was a man's world. They're terrified of that still. They really don't like that. I mean, that's the slogan on, for Kamala and Waltz's,
Mm-hmm.
"We aren't going back," or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They really, really are terrified. That's their, and I really believe they're genuinely afraid of it. Like, I don't
Yeah,
think
it
it's
seems
just
to
a
be. It
slogan.
seems.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that
And
way.
maybe for good reason. I think that,
Yeah.
this isn't a political podcast, but it's germane. I think that, like, I think there's an awareness that we're in an anomaly, that
Mm-hmm.
like this, progressive liberalism is predicated on a certain economic realities, for example, that
Sure.
if the economy goes Stone Age, all that goes away. So
Mm-hmm.
they're in a funny predicament, aren't they? It's a
Yeah,
very
that's a good point.
it's a very uncanny sort of thing. In any case, this
Mm-hmm.
discourse is very alive today. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Le Guin. And you're talking to a writer here. Literature was so much a man's world, and it still is. Look at who the prizes go to. She really resents. She really Ursula, probably rightly, really,
Mm-hmm.
really resents missing out on certain prizes.
Yeah.
Which,
Uh,
I don't blame her. Who do you think she wrote one novel that was a finalist for the National Book Award in the
mm.
80s. I think it might have been, oh, I'll have to look it up. But who do you think she might have lost out to? Let
Well,
me
like
look up
a national book award, not a genre award.
National Book Award. Yeah.
Philip Roth, maybe.
No, no, no,
No,
no.
I don't
Uh,
know.
she would lose out to White Noise one year.
Oh, okay. That was yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like she was a finalist multiple times. So she might have been pissed off about that. I may have gotten my dates wrong and the business
Yeah.
about White Noise wrong, but it looks like she might have been nominated multiple times, but never.
Wow.
She may have won even. Um, uh, in any case, we'll get into it. But you can tell. I'm amazed we got this long without her bitching about prizes. She was really aware of that. Like, and I don't blame. Like, again, your father has a wing of UC Berkeley named after him, so I think
Mhm.
like her feeling of outsiderness. And her mother wrote the first like a best-selling book of anthropology, so that's who
Right.
she's measuring herself against, which I
Yeah.
think is anyway.
Well, and it
Yeah.
is frustrating if you know what you've done creatively and then you lose to something else and you're like, yeah, but my thing's better than that. It's it's not it's frustrating. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like she may have won. Let me find it. I want to get this right because I've got it right. Yeah, no, here we go. Finalist 72, finalist 85. And I think that would have been when she lost. Is that when White Noise came out?
85 you said?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I
White
think that
Noise.
sounds right.
White
Yeah,
Noise.
that sounds
That's
right.
when she lost to White Noise. 72
Mm.
National Book Award finalist, finalist 85, finalist 77, winner 73. And I think
Mm.
the 73 award, well, in any case.
Mm.
Yeah, literature was so much a man's world and it still is. Look at who the prizes go to. It's a very, oh, Ursula, if only you could see 2024.
Yeah, yeah,
If only
she'd
you
be
could see
happy,
the
I
state
guess.
of publishing in 2024, Ursula.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
won. You won. Congratulations. It's a very
Yeah.
slow revolution and it doesn't involve blood and killing people and burning bras and all that stuff. It's going to happen. It's happening. She's right.
Hmm. Hmm.
A little more here. You've written about the way that you balance your writing career with raising your three children, and it sounds like, Le Guin, to call it a balance, it seemed kind of like a madhouse sometimes. And we'll come back to that when we get to her child rearing. So okay, a little bit, of her speaking later in life about her childhood. So let's see. I want to get back here and make sure I got it. Uh yeah, okay. Ursula said later of her father's influence, my father was a profound influence on me. He taught me, and by extension, my work, that we can never fully know or understand another culture, but we must respect it. This principle of cultural relativism, where no culture is seen as superior to another, became central to Le Guin's exploration of different societies in her Hainish cycle novels. Who better to write science fiction about whole planets with wildly different anthropologies, or I guess societies, than the daughter of the leading anthropologist in the United States?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So going back to a little bit more about her parents, Alfred was already a towering figure in the field of anthropology by the time he met Theodora. He had earned his PhD at Columbia under Franz Boas, a pioneering figure in the discipline. His groundbreaking work with Ishi, who emerged from the wilderness in 1911, was foundational for both his career and his household. Uh, Ishi lived at UC Berkeley, like we said, and these family discussions on culture, language, survival, and colonialism were daily topics of conversation in the home. So it's like, how about them Vikings? How about them Detroit Lions? It's a different. Yeah. How about we literally have like the last Indian man of his tribe coming over for dinner to talk about
Right.
his family and his tribe's decimation and the grammar of their language and how their language works, and that's like their dinner table conversation.
Wild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really
wild.
wild. Yeah. Theodora's influence was equally profound on Le Guin. Her book Ishi and Two Worlds became a significant work in Native American studies and deeply affected how Ursula viewed the humanization of marginalized figures. As Le Guin reflected, she was the finest writer in the family, and she showed me that it was possible to express deep thoughts with clarity and compassion. The empathy her mother demonstrated in telling Ishi's story influenced Le Guin's own sensitivity to cultural destruction and the human consequences of colonization. So, this positions her in a way to be a leading voice in the back half of the 20th century when discussions about colonialism and post-colonial identity are at the forefront of the zeitgeist, and they still are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We're still arguing about the nature of colonialism. And I think many of us I think colonialism has sort of been neo-colonialism has been dispersed into the screens and into the economy. And I think there's a lot of funny business that future historians and future, I guess, social scientists will look back on and say, never really ended. It just went into the banking system.
Yeah, metastasized. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think a lot of this business about immigration, which of course seems to be the issue of the year, has to. I mean, obviously, this is fallout from colonialism, and it's sort of the legacy of colonialism, and one has to wonder what incentives are in play here, and what powers are incentivized to bring in new folks to possibly deracinate and turn into debtors and kind of a permanent underclass. How much is colonialism about the mind now over the physical body?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, one of the lenses through which the immigration as it stands is justified. It's sort of like, well, this is colonial. This is the backlash or the sequel to colonization. What did you think was going to happen? That's right or wrong. I think that's the narrative that lives in a lot of people's heads about it.
Well, and you see murals, for example, in the UK, where this discourse is way more top of mind, that say, we didn't come to Britain. Britain came to us. What do you expect?
Yeah. Right.
So there's there's a very interesting, we don't have the answers to this, but this is very, very, very relevant. So you can imagine her writing even now has a lot to tell us. And
for sure,
this background, quite unique. I'm trying to think of all the core subjects we've covered. I don't think there's anybody who came from an intellectual family quite of this standing.
No, not at this level. I mean, like David Foster Wallace's parents were academics, but not like people who were
entire wings of UC Berkeley are named after, and both parents, like the mother, we just dash out a bestseller.
Right. Yeah, it's something else. Yeah. It's funny. I knew a lot about that Ishii thing at one point. I never knew that the connection to Ursula Le Guin.
Yeah. Well, it's like, Lord, give me the confidence of a writer who bitches about being a finalist for the National Book Award.
I love her, but there is this kind of thing I've adopted in recent years is like, I'm not going to feel too bad for people who are way more successful than me at my chosen profession.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. But, we got to remember too, there's always somebody looking at you going, well, I wish I had that. Can't forget that.
Yeah. That's true.
Yep. All right. So the Kraber household was a hive of intellectual curiosity, hosting conversations on topics ranging from philosophy and anthropology to literature and science. Among their frequent visitors was the physicist Robert Oppenheimer. Maybe you heard of him. And old Oppie. And the children were encouraged to engage in these discussions. However, as the youngest of four siblings, Ursula often struggled to be heard. She later joked about this experience, saying, I was outshouted by everybody else. As the youngest and shrillest child of an extraordinarily articulate family, I could only be heard by charging over the top, shouting, Marchands, Marchands, every time I entertained a passing opinion. Okay, so this is this type of family that we're dealing with. I've got something from her conversations on writing, her thoughts on writing. I mean, and if you're a writer or an aspiring writer, this is a banger. Nice little table book. Maybe you're facing the blank page. You can't quite get it together. She talks about, I'm going to read some of this. This is very good. There's a lot of good stuff in here. And the interviewer here is a man named David Nyman. In most art forms, painting, dancing, music, it seems like imitation is part of the learning process, that it is crucial to honing one's craft and finding one's voice. Even the most experimental and innovative painter usually has a period of painting like their predecessors. You don't shy away from recommending imitation as a way to learn to write, but it seems like it is something that writers have traditionally been a little troubled by. Ursula. Maybe not traditionally, but more recently, yes. In the arts, imitation has to be understood by the person doing it as a learning device. Otherwise, it's plagiarism. You imitate only to learn and you don't publish it. Or if you do, you say, this is an imitation of Hemingway, Cormac, Fitzgerald, Ursula, Woolf, whatever. But the internet and competition in college tends to blur the distinction between imitation and plagiarism. Oh boy, we saw a lot of that. And this blurriness leads teachers to warn people not to imitate, and that's foolish. You have to learn by reading good stuff and trying to write that way. If a piano player never heard any other piano player, how would he know what to do? We're not using imitation as it could be used, I think. I kind of agree. I think, I don't know if we had much of this in grad school. Probably there was a little bit of it. But I think you could really do an entire graduate writing or undergraduate writing workshop on imitation. Write a short story in the style of Hemingway.
Yeah, yeah.
You can learn a lot.
Learning to do that style and learning to do a couple of different styles, it's really valuable because you have to, in order to successfully imitate, you have to actually know what are the constituent parts that comprise that style. And then learning to actually use them. Then, I think as you develop, I mean, not that I ever really deliberately imitated people, but I definitely dissected their styles. And then later on, you could be in your writing, you can be like, this really needs like a Hemingway moment. Not full scale plagiarism, steal the style, but like what I really need here is a couple of Hemingway like sentences, because that's really what's going to carry this across. Right. And then you've got that in your quiver. So yeah, I think it's super powerful.
He undressed. He took off his Banana Republic jumper, stepping into the clear, calm pool. He wondered how much he owed on his Banana Republic card. I don't know. But that's the sort of
sure.
Very strong. Yeah. I got a Banana Republic suit recently. This is podcast. What do you think about that would be funny, podcasting in the style of Joe Rogan. Jamie,
right,
pull that up. So you're telling me that these pyramids were built by, I don't believe it. I don't know.
Right.
I can't really do Rogan.
No,
it is funny though. He's
hard to do. I mean, he is a little bit hard to imitate.
That's a man who found his voice. Have us on, Joe. We're ready. We're ready.
Anytime.
Yeah. Okay. And back to the interview.
I'm sure I could find some time on my schedule.
You know what? I will hitchhike down 35W to make it to Austin, Texas, where we went to grad school. We will come down there. If you know what, you give us a little lead time, let us know. We'll come down. All right. We will fly first class, as we say. You've often talked about the importance of sound, and the sound of language is where it all begins, and that language is at its core a physical thing. Brad, you're going to like this. Ursula. I hear what I write. I started writing poetry when I was really young. I always heard it in my head. I realize that a lot of people who write about writing don't seem to hear it, don't listen to it. Their perception is more theoretical and intellectual. But if it's happening in your body, if you're hearing what you write, then you can listen for the right cadence, which will help the sentence run clear. And what young writers always talk about, finding your voice. Well, you can't find your own voice if you aren't listening for it. The sound of your writing is an essential part of what it's doing. Our teaching of writing tends to ignore it, except maybe in poetry. And so we get prose that goes clunk, 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 and we don't know what's wrong with it. The interviewer. You have this wonderful quote from your talk at Portland Arts and Lectures in the year 2000, when Ishii's brain was returned to California. Beneath memory and experience, beneath imagination and invention, beneath words, there are rhythms to which memory and imagination and words all move. The writer's job is to go down deep enough to feel that rhythm, find it, move to it, be moved by it, and let it move memory and imagination to find words. Ursula. That's something that I learned from Virginia Woolf, who talks about it most wonderfully in a letter to her friend Vita. Style, she says, is rhythm, the wave in the mind, the wave, the rhythm. are there before the words and bring the words to fit it. You've cited Woolf as perhaps the best example of the use of rhythm, Ursula. She's an amazing example of the use of a long and subtle rhythm in prose. But there are many, many others. I wrote an essay about the rhythm of Tolkien's writing in The Lord of the Rings. Short rhythms repeated uh, from long rhythms. There's a cyclical repetition in his work, which I think is part of why it totally enchants so many of us. No, it's short rhythms repeated form long rhythms. So there's this fractal rhythm within rhythm. We are caught in this rhythm and are happy there. And I'm going to read, there's some citations here from To the Lighthouse and then from Tolkien. So I'm going to read this. You've read Wolf, right?
A fair bit, yeah, not comprehensively, but the waves into the lighthouse and
you got to read the waves into the lighthouse. Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
this is Wolf to the Lighthouse, who we covered, Wolf, and I made the mistake of listening to her actual voice. Then indeed peace had come, messages of peace breathed from the sea to the shore, never to break its sleep anymore, to lull it rather more deeply to rest. And whatever the dreamers dreamt, holily dreamt wisely to confirm what else was it murmuring, as Lily Briscoe laid her head on the pillow in the clean, still room and heard the sea. Through the open window, the voice of the beauty of the world came murmuring, too softly to hear exactly what it said, but what mattered if the meaning were plain. Woo, doggy. Yeah. Whoa, doggy. And then here's Tolkien. Upon great pedestals founded in the deep waters stood two great kings of stone. Still with blurred eyes and crannied brows, they frowned upon the north. The left hand of each was raised palm outwards in gesture of warning. In each right hand there was an axe. Upon each head there was a crumbling helm and crown. Great power and majesty they still wore, the silent wardens of a long-vanished kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And then the interviewer asks her about grammar and the importance of grammar, to which she says, in my generation, and for a while after, I was born in 1929, we were taught grammar right from the start. It was quietly drilled into us. We knew the names of the parts of speech. We had a working acquaintance with how English works, which they don't get in most schools anymore. There's so much less reading in schools and very little teaching of grammar. For a writer, this is kind of like being thrown into a carpenter's shop without ever having learned the names of the tools or handled them consciously. What do you do with a Phillips screwdriver? What is a Phillips screwdriver? We're not equipping people to write. We're just saying, you too can write. Or anybody can write. Just sit down and do it. But to make anything, you've got to have the tools to make it. Interviewer, you talk about the usefulness of diagramming sentences, that by diagramming them, you discover that sentences have skeletons. Ursula, I was taught that in school, that was the previous generation. My mother and my great aunt could diagram a sentence, and they showed me how. I enjoyed it. For anyone who has that kind of mind, it's illuminating. It's kind of like drawing the skeleton of a horse. You go, oh, that's how they hang together. Do you know how to diagram sentences, Brad?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I could be stumped by a particularly complicated one, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I tutored. I taught ACT and SAT prep for a long time, and it's interesting because you get even the smartest students never really formally learned grammar, and so they're good at the grammar stuff just because they have a good ear, but like they don't actually know the rules. It's kind of interesting, you know. Some 18-year-old honors student who's like kind of vaguely knows what a verb is. You know, it's
I was always off the charts with like verbal stuff, man. Like it's like absurdly off the charts with like all of that. Not that it means much, but I mean it's here I am. But I also found it very boring, the study of grammar.
There's like a point in which you're like, who cares?
Sure.
At a certain level, but like that level to me is like several layers deep. And then you hit it and you're like, yeah, I don't really care that much at that point.
Yeah. Well, we're going to come back a little bit more to that book, but I thought that was a good kind of
it's great.
Yeah,
I love this
really,
stuff. She's talking about the rhythm. I think about that all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right.